want to pick up our conversation about the 2024 races with Hartford Courant columnist and Daily Ruction's author, Kevin Rennie. And Kevin Rennie is with us here now to talk about the 2024 political season, which is really interesting this year. Our former president convicted and so much more. Let's begin with the presidential race. Where do you think that stands right now?
I'm worried that a loathsome demagogue is once more going to have the Republican nomination for the third time in a row. And he clearly has support in the United States.
Do you think there's a chance that it will not be him as the nominee?
No, I don't think there's any chance at all. No, but I think that, it is nevertheless, even though we've known for a while that he was going to be the Republican nominee, it's nevertheless troubling. It will grow more troubling as the campaign progresses, because he says horrific things because he believes terrible things.
What are Connecticut Republicans telling you about him? I mean, they must be concerned.
They try not to talk about him. They're worried. They are worried they're going to lose more seats in the state legislature, which of course is what the big campaigns are, and they are, they're disappearing as a force, and I think a large part of that is the reaction to Donald Trump.
Let's talk about the race for the U.S. Senate. We just had Jerry Smith on. What did you think of what he had to say? Because you broke the story about the burning crosses.
Yeah, the fundraising on the burning crosses. Well, I think he probably should have made a little bit more of the fact that he repudiated that message used for fundraising, and that he had fired his campaign manager. I think people would like to hear that. That might be reassuring for Republican primary voters. The excuse he gave for that appalling tweet about Soviet-era tyranny in the United States, I mean, that is just because he wanted to be as outrageous as he thinks a verdict of 12 New Yorkers on a jury.
I want to shift gears completely and talk about a remarkable column you wrote recently. It took you 50 years to write, and that was about the loss of your brother back in the 1970s. Tell me about that.
1974, and in May. He was 6 years old, and he was diagnosed that January with a very aggressive, rare form of cancer. He had surgery, and there was nothing that could be done. And in fact, at the time, it took doctors a while to figure out exactly what they had removed from his body. And he died about 5 months later.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 15.
15. So you remember it vividly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it was probably the defining event of my life.
To lose a sibling. And you wrote in the column just how difficult it was on your parents, obviously, but that your father was given all the information, but your mother was not. Talk about that a little bit.
So the doctors knew what Kurt's prognosis was at the time of his surgery, and they only told my father. And I learned, and as that terrible spring went on, in April of 1974, it was clear what was going to happen, and so my mother was told. And
but she was told late.
She was told late. And the days, the weeks, the months between the time he came home and then when he died, those were times she just felt, well, maybe we would have done things differently. Maybe we would have done more things or whatever. It was not knowing. So 30 years ago, I met with a doctor who I asked to review his records, and it was noted in the records that the doctors really were reluctant not to tell my mother, but my father insisted. After Kurt died, my mother went to meet with John Springer, who was the president of Hartford Hospital. I didn't tell anybody until much later, got a meeting with him and told him that her suffering had been greatly added to by the fact that she had not been told what was going to happen to her son.
And the hospital changed their policy because of her. And you call that Dorothy's Law, Dorothy's Rule?
I call it the well, I say to me it's the Dorothy Rennie Rule. But yeah, and so I appeared last Sunday, and I have received the most extraordinary messages from people I know, but also from many, many strangers telling me similar stories about mothers not being treated fairly in those years.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the time, and even in the years after, I thought, well, you know, this was a terrible thing that happened to my mother, not thinking that it really had happened to a lot of other mothers too.
And now she's helping other mothers and other parents
Yes.
deal with this horrible news because
Yes.
now it's handled so much differently because of her.
Yeah, well, yes, certainly at Hartford Hospital.
Yeah.
I do think, you know, that over time, those things in other places, I hope have changed. But yes, she did. You know, you feel pretty helpless at a time like that.
Was this cathartic for you to you know, because we all hold grief inside, to research this story
No.
and to talk about it? Was not?
I wouldn't say it was cathartic. You know, I think I mentioned there's no closure. There's no, it's there. I don't dwell on it. But I'm aware of it. I'm particularly aware of it in the springtime when the anniversary is coming up. I'm really the last one who pays attention to May 29th. And last year, it was 49 years. And I did think to myself, next year I'm going to have to write something or I will never write anything. Yeah. And my mother, like a lot of parents who lose a child, was also burdened by the thought that because he was only 6, he'd be forgotten. So that's why I did it.
50 years later, we're talking about him. Well, we appreciate you writing that column, Kevin. I know you helped a lot of people with that. I know it wasn't easy to write, so we appreciate you being here. Thanks, Kevin Rennie. Next, remembering State Police Trooper First Class Aaron Pelletier.